Hidden Teachings of the Bible. 5 things believers must know about fasting. There is no strict command in the Bible that believers must fast. However, the words of Christ pointed out that all believers should fast. In Matthew 6 verse 16, Jesus said, "Moreover, when ye fast, be not as hypocrites, of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily I say to you, they have their reward." The discussion on fasting came up immediately after Jesus set the pattern for praying. This shows that prayer and fasting are complementary. Furthermore, Jesus said, "When ye fast." He used the expression to imply that all believers should fast. Fasting is a discipline of self-denial. It means living a life that is separated from pleasures. Fasting could be carried out in different ways. However, whichever way anyone chooses to fast, all forms of correct fasting helps to put the flesh under subjection. If anyone claims to be fasting without having their body being put under check, then such a person is not fasting correctly. Each time you fast, your flesh is expected to be weakened and put under subjection, while your spiritual sensitivity to sin and to the Holy Spirit is enhanced. Fasting puts a high level of discipline on our flesh. However, it does not mean that we punish ourselves when we fast. There is a vast difference between discipline and punishment. The reason we have to fast to discipline our flesh is because the flesh is our enemy. One of the greatest enemies is the flesh, our old nature. Your flesh is not saved. Your spirit is what is saved. Your physical body will still desire the sinful practices it used to practice before you were saved. Galatians 5 verses 16 to 17 says, "This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would." The greatest enemy that the Holy Spirit encounters in his operation in human lives is not the devil, but the flesh. The flesh has long developed its own unruly appetites as against the wish of the Spirit of God. Therefore, we have to fight our way through by putting our flesh under subjection. And one of the ways we can put our flesh under subjection is through the practice of fasting. The only way not to fulfill the lust of the flesh is to walk in the Spirit. And one of the most effective ways to get ourselves inclined to the Holy Spirit is through fasting. Let's observe some hidden truths about fasting. 1. Fasting is motivated by a deep spiritual desire. Any fast that will be accepted by God must be motivated by a deep spiritual desire. This desire is not to be seen and honored by men, but a desire for the presence of God. When you are no longer comfortable with your current spiritual state, then there is a yearning in your spirit to go for a retreat. If you are not motivated to fast by a deep spiritual desire, then you will most likely fast like hypocrites do. Hypocrites fast to be seen. Hypocrites fast to be adored. Hypocrites fast so that others may see them. Hypocrites fast so that people commend them for their spiritual growth. But true fasting is not to be seen. It is not to be adored. True fasting is a deep spiritual desire, a desire for intimacy with the Lord, a desire for intimacy with the Holy Spirit. Fasting is a yearning of your soul for the deep things of God. It is such a yearning that David spoke about it in Psalm 42 verses 1 to 2, which should foster our desire to fast. As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. My soul thirsteth for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? So, when you fast, don't do it for others. No. Do it for closeness with the Lord. 2. It enhances our spiritual sensitivity. Have you observed that oftentimes when you fast, you become more conscious of sin and God's presence than when you don't? Fasting sharpens your spiritual senses and makes you alert in the spirit. When you are fasting, you make more of an effort to avoid sins that easily ensnare you. It makes you watchful against sin and helps you to discern temptation more easily. More so, in the period of fasting, it is easier for us to hear from God because our heart is aligned. Our expectation is heightened to receive from God when we fast. The fact is that fasting makes us susceptible to the Spirit. Fasting is not what makes God speak to us. Rather, it is what makes our spirit more sensitive to hear God and to pick spiritual signals. We become more alive to God, and we can communicate more effectively with Him when we fast. John 4 verse 24 says that God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must do so in spirit and in truth. 3. It is not something you do for God. It is erroneous to think that we fast for God's sake. If we carry such a mentality, we will think that God has something to benefit from our fast. Then, rather than getting blessed when we fast, we will think we are doing God a favor. Fasting does not help God. It changes us. Fasting is not something you do for God. It is for your utmost benefit. You can't fast or pray for God. He doesn't need any support system. Before we were, God existed, and when we will be no more, He will continue to exist. Fasting aligns us with the heart of God. It helps us to understand God more and to see into the Spirit. We fast for ourselves, not for God. More so, fasting does not change God. It changes us. It prepares us for what God has prepared for us. 4. It helps you to overcome sinful desires. Galatians 5 verses 16 to 17 says, This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. One of the ways by which believers walk in the Spirit is through fasting. The Spirit and the flesh are always in opposition to each other. So, you give your spirit power over the unruly tendencies of the flesh when you fast. Fasting is a great discipline for the flesh. It subdues the flesh and makes it aligned to the Spirit. The more you fast, the lesser you have sinful desires. Fasting kills the appetite of your flesh for sin. If only gluttons will discipline themselves and subject their bodies to fast, they will overcome that abnormal appetite. The more you fast, the more your flesh is dealt with. You will find out that lust is losing grip over you. We think we cannot overcome certain sinful desire because we have not subjected ourselves to enough spiritual discipline. Fasting increases your spiritual temperature and makes you comfortable to stay around sin. When we fast, we learn to say no to the body's most basic and powerful desire, for food. Simply put, if you can gain control over your body's basic desire for food, you can learn to control your body's desire for anything. Once you learn to say no to food, you can say no to lust and sexual immorality. Fasting is largely a matter of self-denial and self-discipline. Anyone who cannot discipline himself or herself cannot fast. And if you can discipline yourself to fast, you can almost discipline yourself in other areas that require discipline. The flesh always longs for pleasure and comfort, and if we follow its dictates, it will put us into serious trouble. Fasting often helps us to put our flesh under check, so that its appetites do not lead us astray. As we give ourselves to fasting, we will discover that our minds are being narrowed to the things of the Spirit. More so, the unwholesome thoughts that make people fall into the sin of lust and the act of fornication, adultery, masturbation, and the likes is being dealt with. Fasting makes us susceptible to the Spirit. Again, when we fast, we are strengthened to resist temptations and we become more conscious of sin than ever. It requires discipline for us to achieve this, because it is not the responsibility of God to keep our bodies under subjection. This is one of the most important lessons you will ever receive. Understanding this will revolutionize your walk with God and improve your walk with the Lord. The lesson is this: there are some things that God does for us, and there are some things that you have to do for yourself. For instance, Romans 12 verse 1. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. God only had the responsibility to reconnect our spirit to His when we gave our lives to Christ. But the responsibility to put our body under subjection is ours. Listen to what the verse says, and look at where the responsibility is placed. Romans 12 verse 1. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. The responsibility is on you.